What happens when a human professor eats a simple breakfast on an alien planet? Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and coffee right in front of her students from 4 different species? Confusion, curiosity, and intergalactic chaos. What begins? As an ordinary morning turns into a mind-blowing cultural event that leaves an entire galaxy questioning everything they thought they knew about humans. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and show a big thumbs up by liking the video now. Let's jump into the story. Dr. Nyla Varan stood quietly in front of the curved window that made up half the wall of her new living space. The view outside was unlike anything she had ever seen on Earth. Pale blue clouds drifted slowly across a golden sky, and 2 giant moons hovered in the distance, casting long shadows over the floating trees of Saravan 9. It was like living inside a dream, painted by a child with too many crayons and no rules. She had been on the planet for only 6 days, yet every time she looked outside, she felt like a tourist in her own life. Nyla was not just here to sightsee. She had been chosen, after many tests and interviews and hopeful waiting, to become the first human instructor at the Galactic Harmony Academy. The academy was built at the center of the planet's capital, Yeltrana, a shining city of spiraling towers and bridges that shimmered like spiderwebs in the wind. Her job was to teach biological sciences to students from across the galaxy, a task that sounded both exciting and terrifying. The more she read about the students she would be teaching, the more she realized how little she knew. Her apartment was built for comfort, but not exactly for humans. Everything had been adjusted to accommodate the 5 most common species living in this part of the galaxy. That meant low archways for the Glimari, who floated instead of walked. Padded walls for the Plarvi, whose bodies were soft and heat-sensitive. And floor grooves for the Dronari, who had long chitin-covered limbs and didn't like to slip. Even the faucet knobs were confusing. She had burned her hand on day 2. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something sweet, like melted sugar. The life support system kept it safe for humans, but the scent always lingered. Nyla's suitcase had arrived late, so she had spent the first few days in a standard academy outfit, a shapeless gray robe that made her look like a space monk. Now, freshly showered and finally dressed in her own clothes, she felt almost like herself again. She sipped from her travel mug, the only thing that had survived the journey with no damage. Inside it was earth-grown coffee, the one familiar comfort she had brought in bulk. She had even smuggled in her favorite blend. It tasted like sanity in a cup. Her communicator buzzed softly from the kitchen counter. She walked over and tapped the screen. A message popped up from Dean Oralix, the luminous leader of the Academy's interspecies education program. Professor Varan, your first class begins in 2 hours. 12 students from 4 species. All are excited to meet the Academy's first human instructor. Good luck. Nyla took a deep breath. She had spent months preparing lesson plans, translating slides into Galactic Common, and practicing how to smile in a way that didn't look threatening to the Velari, who mistook human teeth for signs of aggression. But today wasn't just about teaching. It was about making a good first impression, being an ambassador for Earth, and not scaring any of the students away before the first lesson. She walked over to her compact wardrobe and stared at the options provided by the Academy. Most of the outfits were sleek, silver, and made of materials that shimmered in odd lighting. She picked a simple teal tunic with soft black pants and a lightweight jacket. It looked professional without being too formal, and it didn't sparkle, thankfully. She wanted to seem approachable, not like a walking disco ball. Once dressed, she turned her attention to the small kitchen unit. Breakfast time. The food replicator provided by the Academy could produce several meal options, but the texture was always just a little off. So Nyla had brought her own emergency stash of Earth food. Dehydrated eggs, vacuum-packed bacon, butter packets, and some slices of real earth bread. The academy had warned her about importing meat products, but she had filled out the forms. Twice as she cracked open the tiny egg container and started cooking on the hot plate, the smell of home filled the air. Warm eggs, crispy bacon, and the faint sweetness of toasted bread. It was almost enough to trick her brain into thinking she wasn't billions of miles from Earth. She spread butter over the toast, filled a container with orange juice from a chew, sealed bottle, and poured a second cup of coffee into a thermal mug. Then she packed everything carefully into small containers and slipped them into her teaching bag, right next to her presentation materials. Her plan was to eat quickly at her desk before the students arrived. That way, she wouldn't start her first lecture with a growling stomach. The transport pod to the academy arrived right on time. She climbed into the human-sized seat and watched as the city passed by outside. Everything on Saravon 9 looked like it had been imagined by someone who had never seen a straight line. Buildings curved, streets floated, and transportation tubes glowed with soft light as they moved silently between towers. It was beautiful and a little dizzying as the academy came into view, a shining white structure, shaped like a spiral shell. Nayla felt a flutter in her chest. She was about to walk into a classroom where not a single student had ever met a human before. And she had packed bacon. She didn't know it yet, but her breakfast would soon become the most talked about meal in the galaxy. The classroom was bigger than Nayla expected. The ceilings were so high she could barely see the top, and the lights shifted colors slowly, creating a calming glow across the wide space. The furniture looked more like art than chairs, each one specially made for different species. One section had tall, narrow seats for the Quarnics, who were crystal-bodied and preferred to sit upright. Another section had shallow water basins for the Plarvi, who needed to stay partially submerged to stay comfortable. The Dronari had metal platforms shaped like spider webs to support their long legs, and the Olari had soft nests that looked like fluffy beanbags, perfect for their small, round bodies. Everything was different, but it was all designed to work together. Just like the academy itself, Nayla stepped into the room and paused at her desk. She still had about 20 minutes before the students were expected to arrive. She sat down, her teaching bag, powered up the presentation screen, and looked around one last time to make sure everything was in place. Her slides were ready. Her notes were organized. Her nerves were slightly out of control. But there was no going back now. Her stomach growled softly. She hadn't had time to eat that morning, and the smell of her packed breakfast had been teasing her since she got off the transport pod. She glanced at the time again. Maybe she could eat quickly before the students came in. Just a few bites. She pulled out her food containers and set them on the desk. The eggs were still warm, and the bacon smelled so good she almost sighed with happiness. She popped open the orange juice, poured herself a cup of coffee, and picked up her fork. Just as she brought the first bite of scrambled eggs to her mouth, the classroom door slid open with a soft hum. 12 students entered in a slow, curious line. Nayla froze, her fork halfway to her lips. The students paused too, their gazes or whatever equivalent they had locked onto her and her food. One of the Plarvi turned a shade of pale blue, which her translation guide had told her meant mild confusion. The Quarnics glowed a little brighter and moved to their seats without speaking. The Dronari clicked their mandibles softly as they walked across the floor, and the Olari's ears twitched as they climbed onto their cushioned seats. Nayla had two choices: stop eating and go hungry for the next 3 hours, or continue eating and try to pretend this was completely normal. Her stomach made the choice for her. She smiled at the class, took a bite, and stood up with her fork still in hand. "Good morning, everyone," she said cheerfully, chewing quickly. I'm Dr. Naila Veran, and I'll be your instructor for Comparative Life Systems this term. I'm very excited to be here with all of you." She swallowed, took another bite, and kept smiling like this was totally fine. A Cornick student, glowing a soft gold, raised their hand like shard. Their voice was a pleasant hum translated through a speaker on their chest. "Professor Veran, are you consuming biological matter during an academic session?" Naila blinked. "Oh, yes, this is my breakfast. I didn't have time to eat before class, so I hope it's not too distracting." The Cornix's glow flickered. "You are ingesting reproductive material, are you not?" Naila looked at her. Eggs, then back at the student. "Well, yes. These are eggs from a species called chickens on Earth. But don't worry, they're unfertilized. They were never going to become anything." The room fell into an unusual silence. One of the dronari made a rapid clicking sound, and the translation device turned it into a question. "You consume pre-life units and muscle tissue during the same feeding cycle?" Naila realized they were now staring at her bacon. "This is bacon. It's from a pig. Humans eat meat from a variety of animals. It's very normal for us." The Olari students exchanged high-pitched squeaks. One of them raised a paw. "Are you performing a ritual? Is this symbolic?" Naila laughed lightly. "No, not a ritual, just breakfast." As she ate another bite, the reactions grew stronger. The Plarvi turned pink with alarm. The Quarix glowed white. The Dronari all leaned forward, clicking excitedly. One whispered, "Multi-species consumption. Real-time biological processing." Another muttered, "Incredible adaptability." The classroom was turning into a quiet storm of wonder and confusion. Naila took a long sip of orange juice, hoping it might help calm her nerves. It didn't. One of the Cornics pointed at her drink. "What is bright liquid?" "Orange juice," Naila replied. "It's made from fruit." More whispering. The color-changing Plarvi turned bright orange, a shade she wasn't even sure was on their emotion chart. A Dronari clicked. "You consume solids and liquids from multiple life forms in one sitting." Naila smiled again, trying to stay calm. "Yes, humans are what we call omnivores. We evolved to eat many different types of food. Our digestive systems can handle it. It's just how we are." The students sat still, eyes wide or lights blinking or mandibles twitching. One, Olari whispered, "Apex biological processor." Naila didn't know what to say. She had just wanted to eat her breakfast. But now, these students looked at her like she had just solved an ancient mystery. She picked up her coffee and sipped it slowly. Every alien in the room leaned forward at once. The silence was complete until one Dronari clicked out, "You consume hot dark fluid too?" Naila nodded and chuckled softly. "Yes, it's coffee. It helps us feel more awake." More silence. Then, all at once, the students began talking to each other in their unique ways. Flashes, clicks, hums, and squeaks. Naila stood still behind her desk, wondering if she had just started a lesson or an intergalactic incident. One thing was certain. The lesson had begun. Just not the one she had planned. Dr. Naila Veran stood behind her desk, feeling more like a zoo exhibit than a teacher. 12 students from 4 different species were still staring at her with wide eyes, glowing crystals, twitching ears, and clicking jaws. Her breakfast, which had seemed like such a simple thing, eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice, and coffee, had sparked more curiosity than her entire prepared lesson. Every bite had raised a new question. Every sip had triggered shock, wonder, and a flood of questions she hadn't expected to answer during her first class. She took a deep breath, realizing that this moment was no longer about sticking to the plan. Her students weren't just interested in food. They were fascinated by what her meal said about humans. If she had their full attention now, why not? Use it? Maybe this accidental breakfast show and tell could become a real learning opportunity. She smiled and gently closed the lid on her last food container. Then she walked to the large wall screen at the front of the room and tapped the control panel. With a soft beep, a colorful diagram of the human digestive system appeared. "Since we're talking about food," she said, "let me show you how humans process it." The classroom was silent again, but not in a bad way. It was the kind of silence that meant every student was focused, watching closely. Nayla pointed to the diagram. When humans eat, food enters through the mouth. We chew it with our teeth and mix it with saliva. That helps break it down before it moves to our stomach. A dronari clicked rapidly. "So multiple systems begin digestion at once?" "Yes," Nayla replied. "Then in the stomach, strong acid and enzymes continue to break the food into smaller pieces. From there, it goes into our intestines, where nutrients are absorbed into our bodies." One of the larvae turned a shade of deep green, which she remembered meant interest. "You process solids, liquids, and multiple life paste. Materials in sequence?" "Exactly," she said, happy to see them so engaged. "And we can digest thousands of types of foods from fruits and vegetables to meat and grains. We even enjoy combining them into single meals." The Cornic student at the front glowed a steady gold and spoke with a calm hum. "Your breakfast contained reproductive matter, muscle tissue, processed plant substance, and fermented bean extract. Each requires different digestion methods. This is unusual." "I know," Nayla said, "but for humans, it's totally normal. We call ourselves omnivores. Our species evolved this way because early humans had to survive in many different environments. We ate whatever was available: plants, animals, roots, seeds. Over time, our digestive systems became very flexible." Another dronari tilted its head and clicked. "Does this mean your species does not specialize in nutrition sources like others do?" Nayla nodded. "That's right. Some species, like yours, consume only liquids or specific nutrients. But humans need variety. We can't survive on just one thing. We have to balance our meals to stay healthy." She brought up another slide. On the screen, an image of the human food pyramid. The graphic showed different categories: fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, and dairy. She explained how humans are encouraged to eat from each group every day. The reaction was instant. The Olari students began whispering urgently to each other, their large ears trembling with excitement. The larvae turned a bright yellow there. Version of fascination. The dronari started clicking so rapidly that their translator devices beeped to catch up. One of them finally said, "You are required to obtain nutrients from all these sources to avoid malfunction?" "Malfunction?" Nayla blinked. "Oh, you mean sickness?" "Yes. If we don't eat a variety of food, we can get weak, tired, or ill. Our bodies need different vitamins and minerals to function properly." A Cornix raised their glowing shard hand. "Then your civilization must maintain systems to provide all of these materials to your population." "That's true," she said, pulling up photos of farms, markets, and food storage facilities on Earth. "We grow crops, raise animals, and produce food on a large scale. We even trade with other countries to make sure people can get what they need." The students leaned in, completely absorbed. One of the Olari raised a hand. "So your society is structured to support this constant variety of consumption?" Nayla paused. It hadn't occurred to her before, but the student had a point. Earth's entire system, from transportation to economics, was shaped around food. Trucks carried fruits across countries. Ships carried grain across oceans. Markets, restaurants, food factories, all of it existed to keep people fed, in balance, and well. "I suppose it is," she said thoughtfully. "Food is a big part of our lives. It brings people together, It keeps us healthy. It's even part of our traditions and celebrations. The dronari made a clicking noise that translated as, "This is exceptional." Most species develop around survival. You have evolved a culture around variety. Nyla smiled. I guess we have. The classroom was quiet again, but this time it was filled with awe. Her students weren't just learning about human digestion anymore. They were discovering something much deeper, how food reflected human adaptability, creativity, and complexity. A soft chime rang from the wall. It was the signal that class time was almost up. Nayla hadn't even touched her lesson plan. And yet, she had never taught a more engaged class in her life. As the students packed up, they buzzed with conversation, speaking in flashes of light, hums, chirps, and clicks. One by one, they filed out of the room, still deep in discussion. Nayla was just starting to gather her things when her communicator buzzed. A message popped up on the screen from the Academy's headmaster. Dr. Varan, please report to my office, urgently. She stared at the message for a moment, then picked up her bag. She didn't know what was waiting for her upstairs, but she had a strange feeling it had something to do with her breakfast. And possibly the fact that the entire galaxy had just started taking notes. Dr. Nyla Varan stepped into the headmaster's office, still unsure what to expect. The message had sounded serious, but nothing about her first class felt like a disaster. Confusing? Definitely. Unusual? Without a doubt. But it hadn't felt like she had done anything wrong. The glass doors closed behind her, and she found Headmaster Lurol seated behind a curved desk made from living wood that shifted color every few seconds. His eyes, large and silver like polished coins, fixed on her with a calm intensity that made her nervous. Dr. Varan, he began, his voice smooth and deep. I have received no fewer than 17 communications this morning regarding your class. That includes messages from department chairs, local journalists, and even a few research stations on other planets. He tilted his head slightly. May I ask what exactly happened during your session today? Nayla sat in the human-sized chair across from him, folded her hands in her lap, and offered a cautious smile. I ate my breakfast. Laurel blinked slowly. You consumed a meal. During class, she nodded. Yes, I didn't want to be late, and I hadn't eaten. I thought I'd just eat quietly while the students arrived. Laurel leaned back, his expression unreadable. The students have described the event in much grander terms. Nyla's eyebrows rose. Grand? It was just scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and coffee. According to your students, Laurel said, you demonstrated live multi-species consumption, explained complex biological systems without notes, and revealed that humans design entire ecosystems for the sole purpose of nutrition. One of the Dronari students referred to you as a living model of apex consumption. Nyla's eyes widened. That's a bit traumatic, don't you think? Laurel allowed a faint smile. Perhaps. But the story is already spreading. A Plarvi news outlet just published a headline. Human professor processes 4 life forms before class begins. It's causing quite the stir. Nyla groaned and covered her face with one hand. All I did was eat breakfast. Yes, Laurel said thoughtfully. But for most species on Saravan 9, and throughout this quadrant, public feeding is rare. Consuming matter from multiple life forms is even rarer. And doing so while teaching? That's almost unheard of. She dropped her hand and looked at him. So, I've embarrassed the Academy? Quite the opposite, he replied. You've fascinated the galaxy. We've already received requests for interviews, guest lectures, and collaborative studies on human biology and food systems. Several species want to learn how humans develop such nutritional flexibility. Others are asking about your food preparation methods. One Velari chef has offered to study Earth cuisine. Nayla blinked. Because I ate eggs and bacon. Exactly, said Laurel. For a moment, Nayla didn't know whether to laugh or hide under the desk. But eventually, she chuckled. I guess humans really are weirder than we think. Or, the headmaster added, simply more adaptable than most species expected. By the time she left the office, her communicator was already buzzing again. More requests, more messages. Her students had apparently written a group report titled The Human Digestive System, a model of multi-source efficiency. It was being circulated through the Academy's internal network. Several professors from other departments had forwarded it to their colleagues. Within hours, Nayla's breakfast had become the subject of academic discussion, cross-species debate, and even artistic interpretations. One Olari student was painting a mural titled Egg of Enlightenment. That evening, as Nayla walked back to her apartment, the city lights of Yeltrona sparkled in the sky like low-hanging stars. Flying transport pods zipped quietly between towers. Colorful banners advertising the next interspecies festival danced in the wind. She paused outside her building and looked up at the twin moons overhead. Somehow, in a single morning, she had gone from new teacher to interstellar curiosity. And all because she didn't skip breakfast. Inside, her apartment was quiet. The view from the window was just as breathtaking as it had been her first day, trees floating gently in the breeze, lights twinkling in the distance, and the soft colors of an alien world wrapping everything in warmth. Nayla walked into her small kitchen and opened the fridge. She looked at the ingredients she had saved for the next day. More eggs, a few slices of toast, peanut butter, bananas. She sighed, then smiled. Her communicator chimed again. This time, it was a message from Earth. It was from her supervisor at the Human Cultural Exchange Office. Nayla, congratulations. Word has reached us about your lesson. The Scientific Council is thrilled. We'd like to request a short video explanation of your breakfast, preferably before the next Interstellar Education Summit. Great work, Nayla laughed. Sure, I'll explain breakfast. Maybe even lunch too. The next morning, she stood, once again in her classroom, coffee in one hand, a peanut butter banana sandwich in the other. As her students began to file in, they all greeted her with eager expressions. A few even carried datapads. One Plarvi was already changing colors in anticipation. A Dronari clicked a cheerful greeting. The Quarnix glowed gently, without even meaning to. She had created a new kind of lesson one that combined science, culture, and curiosity. She took a bite of her sandwich and smiled at the class. Today, she said with a wink, we'll explore plant-based proteins. And perhaps why bananas are yellow. The classroom burst into a mix of colors, clicks, and cheers. Nayla didn't know what the future would hold, but she was certain of one thing. In a galaxy full of wonders, sometimes the simplest things like breakfast could connect worlds in the most unexpected ways.